Welcome to Inside the Broncos, Football in the West. The championship week edition is here. We told you, we threatened you actually last week, that if Boise State won, we'd be back in your grill again this week. Here we are. Everybody, no applause. I didn't get any applause from the control room.
The audience is gone, Paul.
All right,
now
guys.
You've lost them. We still got another 28 minutes.
Well, for the next half hour, we're going to talk about all the conference championship games that are out there, all 7 of the ones that will be played. Now, we're going to talk about the MAC championship, which is actually being played right now. So we'll get to that a little later. That game will be in progress. But we're still going to give you our thoughts because there's a lot of football left to play there. But we'll cover all 7 championship games. And we'll cover the Boise State-Fresno State game in depth at the end of the program. Well, Jeff, you know, it was a windy night at Broncos Stadium, but the Broncos came to play. What was the environment like in the stadium, in the crowd, with the people there?
I thought, first of all, I thought the crowd was great.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're only a couple of thousand short of a sellout, it's spread out. You really couldn't tell. So students showed up, season ticket holders showed up, fans that sit on whatever end zone side showed up. So I thought that was outstanding. And then I thought the tempo and the way that Boise State started really got the fans into the game early. And that helps a lot. When you start keeping that momentum after the kickoff and the Senior Day celebration, and you keep it, then I think it hurt Utah State, specifically their young quarterback, and the crowd feels good about themselves, and they just had a good time.
Well, I could certainly see that at 34-12 at halftime, it sent a few folks home. And you can understand that. You know, when you're up by 20 points at the half and the weather's a little iffy, people have a tendency to move on down the road. Let's talk a little bit about the college football poll. Boise State checking in at 22. Marshall checks out. Colorado State's not an issue now since they lost to Air Force. So it's out there. It's waiting. Everybody's waiting for it. It's the opportunity to get back to a big bowl game for Boise State. Your thoughts on how the college football poll panned out this week? Is it pretty much what you expected?
Yeah, nobody thought Boise State would go up too much based off off a win from Utah State, who doesn't really have any other huge wins outside of what they've done in conference, which is great. But now they wait and figure out, okay, will they send them back to Atlanta to play in the Peach Bowl? Probably not. It's a 10:30 a.m. game, New Year's Eve. Would they send them to the Cotton Bowl, New Year's Day at 10:30 in the morning? Possibly, if Wisconsin comes up with a big win, if Kansas State comes up with a big win, that could be a possibility because Baylor may need a place to play or Kansas State may need a place to play, and that may make some sense. But the odds are they should be getting to the Fiesta Bowl. That's what should happen here.
All right, very good. Well, a third trip to the Fiesta Bowl, I'm sure would make a lot of fans happy. When we come back, we're going to recap that Boise State-Utah State game in depth right here on Inside the Broncos, Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technology.
Football in the West is brought to you by Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley Solar Authority, and Steve's Hometown Ford and Steve's Hometown Toyota, 100% committed to your satisfaction. Also by Western Heating and Cooling, turn to the experts, and Leisure Time Spas and Hearth Products. Come see us at Leisure Time. You'll be glad you did.
We are back inside the Broncos, Football in the West. Well, last week it was Utah State that came to town, the vaunted Aggie defense against the J-Train and Hedrick and the whole crew. And boy, did Boise State come out of the locker room just fired up and ready to roll. It was an impressive first half.
I thought so. I thought they played really physical. And I know Utah State probably wasn't ready for that, specifically Boise State's offensive line, because you look at the first couple of drives, Poe, and it was Ajayi left and right and center, and McNichols mix in some of that, and then they hit him with some big passes to Spurbeck, and they hit him with Rowe. They caught him off balance. They just were razor sharp in their execution. And so it tells me this team was extremely determined and focused, and maybe that approach earlier in the year to return to the Boise State of old worked. And these guys are determined to say that they're still the king of the mountain. And that could have worked. I thought it may backfire because I don't think you should ever look back. But it may have worked this time because that was a hungry group.
Well, I'm going to look way back. So for some of you old timers that are out there was a coach here by the name of Bill Dutton, and I know you had up close and personal content with him. He had a saying called a program of discouragement.
Yeah.
And I thought that's exactly what happened on Saturday night. That Utah State team got so discouraged by what they couldn't do and what they couldn't react to that it just blew their whole game. It blew their minds. They couldn't figure it out. It was really interesting to watch. Now, Ajayi with 229 yards and 5 touchdowns, and we find out this week, not the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year.
Right.
Okay, I guess I can live with that. He did have the second most yards rushing in the league. Mm-hmm. But do you think he earned that because of the place that Boise State finished in?
I do. Garrett Grayson fell short. They lost a couple of games. He was pedestrian, I thought. He couldn't lead them to victory over Boise State in Albertson Stadium, nor could he lead them to victory over Air Force on the road. So he was asked to do those things in those games to be the most valuable player on offense in this league versus Jay Ajayi, who did carry the team.
Well, I know on your show this week on Idaho Sports Talk, there was some conjecture that maybe those votes were made before the Boise State-Utah State game. Some people just filled out the ballot, sent it in, and got rid of it so they didn't have to mess with it over the weekend. That would have eliminated Grayson's poor performance and Ajayi's great performance to just put the stamp, that exclamation point on a great season.
Exactly. So the coaches' votes counted twice as much as the media's votes. So each coach had double weighting on his vote, and there's like 27 media votes approximately, I'm pretty sure. So they almost canceled each other out there. So who did what, where, when? I think it just gives us another thing to grind on.
Sure.
Just another thing to bring up, that it is us against
Bitter
the world.
Boise State guys against the rest of the Mountain West.
Yeah, that's it. And just another example of trying to create conflict so we, again, have something to engage in. That's all right.
Well, the defense also put on a stellar performance. Besides that first rush that was 55 yards, the rest of that game was absolutely flawlessly played. Shut them out in the second half. The only points were scored on a fumble return for a touchdown.
I thought the big key, Poe, and going into the game as well, was what is Utah State going to do on third down?
Yeah.
When you're third and long, third and medium, can you throw the football? Can you read the defense? Can you see where the rush is coming from? And the answer was no. The kid wasn't ready. He was 1 for 11. That offense misfired. They couldn't handle third downs. Game over.
All right. Well, when we come back, it's time to delve into the rest of the championship games that are out there. In fact, we're going to talk about one that's being played right now as we speak here on Inside the Broncos, Football in the West. Welcome back to Inside the Broncos, Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley's solar authority. All right, let's turn our attention to a game being played right now. The MAC Championship, the Mid-American Conference, is on the tube right now, and it is Bowling Green and Northern Illinois.
Yeah, it's sort of a revenge game. Last year, Bowling Green knocked Northern Illinois out of the BCS conversation. Stopped them cold. This year's Northern Illinois team's different. There's no Heisman Trophy candidates. There's no star running backs. They're just a solid football team. They're really the Boise State of the MAC.
All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Pac-12 Conference. This game is being played in Santa Clara at the new Levi's Stadium. That's where the 49ers play their games. It's Arizona and it's Oregon. This game is on a little later this evening, and this is a game where it could very well impact who and where Boise State plays if they get the job done tomorrow night.
Yeah, Arizona can win this, make it happen for themselves, put themselves into the Fiesta Bowl. There's still some doubt about some of that stuff, but we'll have to worry about that later. Nick Wilson's the key, I think, for Arizona and their defense. Oregon can't come back with the same game plan. That 3-3-5 defense of Arizona posed put eight guys on the field that can run. They haven't been able to block it. They sacked Mariota. They beat him 2 times in a row now. This could be number 3. They're going to have to change their game plan. And if the Arizona running game is on with Wilson, they're going to have tons of one-on-one throwing opportunities. And outside of losing their top Grant, their top wide receiver, to a DUI for who knows, a quarter, a half, we don't know what it is. I think Arizona's in good shape there. I just have a hard time believing Oregon's going to lose for the 3rd time in a row to Arizona.
Well, and Arizona went into Autzen Stadium, and we win in that place. Doesn't happen very often, and especially for Pac-12 teams. Once in a while, they'll get beat by somebody else there, but boy, if you beat them as a Pac-12 team there, I think maybe Stanford might have been the last team to do it. But should be an interesting game. All right, let's turn our attention to the Atlantic Coast Conference, and Florida State and Georgia Tech presents a very interesting matchup. The Jameis Winston conversation still continues. This guy is the center of controversy no matter what he does. There's, issues going on with domestic violence and all kinds of things that he's having to deal with off the field. His on-the-field antics have been chronicled somewhat. Your thoughts on Georgia Tech, who's kind of come out of nowhere to get into this championship game?
Well, Georgia Tech's a triple option team, and while they've run the ball really well for 300-plus yards, and I think they frustrate people, they don't let you get the ball, so you're going to have to be very efficient on offense, something Florida State's not been. Winston, I think he had 40 touchdown passes or whatever last year's Heisman Trophy winner. 21 touchdown passes, 17 interceptions this season. He's not the same quarterback. And Georgia Tech, they have about 16 or 17 interceptions, one of the best in the country at taking the ball away. And when Georgia Tech throws the football, they throw for touchdowns. I mean, they have like 80 completions, of which 16 or 17 are for touchdowns.
Wow.
And they run the ball. I think it's a trap game. I think Florida State's had 6 teams within 7 points of beating them. So they're ready to go.
Well, all you have to do is look at the Las Vegas point spread. Florida State's only a 3.5-point favorite. 3.5-point favorite for a team that's won 28 games in a row is amazing.
Yeah, and started with this game in 2012. This is where their win streak started, in this ACC championship game in Charlotte against Georgia Tech. So they have a chance to turn it around full circle. Florida State last year, Poe, was beating people by an average of 45 points a game.
All right, very good. Well, coming up in our next segment, we're going to touch on a couple of big games in the SEC and the Big Ten here on Inside the Broncos Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technology. All right, welcome back to Inside the Broncos Football in the West. Larry Pulowski, Jeff Caves with you here. Time to turn our attention to Conference USA and a team that's got to be really disappointed.
Sure.
And really upset about what's happened to them. And we're talking about Marshall having to take on Louisiana Tech, who put up 76 points last weekend.
Against Rice. I think Marshall's had some emotional things they've had to deal with when they didn't get ranked in the top 25 poll, and Boise State did, and they were right behind them, and it was a challenge. And then their offense, I thought, let them down with 4 interceptions early in that game against Western Kentucky. And that put them off on the wrong foot, and they could never really recover. I think they got the lead back once. And ultimately, it was their pass defense, Poe. Ultimately, they couldn't stop the pass, the third best passing offense in the country in Western Kentucky. And we underestimated that, and they average over 40 points. Yeah. And they showed why.
Well, it just shows you, some of those teams come out of the woodwork and you just don't know what to expect. That is Conference USA. All right, the SEC. This is the game that leads into the Mountain West Championship games. It's on CBS tomorrow afternoon. And obviously, Alabama expected to be there. Missouri, maybe not so much.
Yeah, not necessarily. And by the way, we'll carry that game on 93.1 The Ticket in case you're driving around. You want to hear that. But how can you stop Alabama in this game? How can that happen in this game? They have too much at stake. You look at the record. I think Saban's only lost one time in these situations. This isn't Auburn across from them. This isn't a Missouri team with a great wide receiver or a tremendous quarterback. This is a team that sort of just made it through attrition on that side of the SEC. Without a bunch of turnovers, I can't see it happening.
So, Jeff, what does Alabama and Boise State have in common this year?
Played Mississippi.
They both lost to Mississippi. So that's Alabama's only loss coming in here. And, when you look at them, they don't have a lot of stat guys. That's the one thing that really stands out to me when I look at this game. Alabama is more of a well-rounded, even keel type of a team. They don't rely on the superstar to get things done. But Missouri, kind of the same. Actually very lackluster offensively, but they get the job done, and they've won 10 games this year.
Yeah, if there is somebody that fits that bill, it's Amari Cooper, the wide receiver who went crazy against Auburn, and he is such a physically gifted guy. I hope he holds up. His knee brace was a little worrisome if you watched that Auburn game last weekend. But you're right. They're nondescripted quarterback. They have a tremendous O-line. Not many people follow that. But there isn't the variety of defensive stars on this team. So Saban's done it again. He's reloaded. He's primed to go into now having to win 2 games for a national championship should they make the playoffs. That'll be more difficult.
So do you think he earns his, $7 million salary? Isn't that what he gets?
Well, what he creates in a gross volume of money for that state, he's frankly,
underpaid?
I think he's underpaid. There's no question in my mind he's underpaid.
Well, it's just an interesting situation with Missouri here. Now, just think about this. If you're the college football poll board or whatever the group. Committee. Okay, I'm sorry. What happens if Missouri wins?
Well, there's
my
a
gosh,
problem.
You talk about a monkey wrench.
That's a problem. And how does the game go? But if you're Ohio State and you beat Wisconsin, you're thrilled. If you're Baylor and you can take care of business against Kansas State, I think you're excited. Because I have a hard time believing that they'll knock Alabama out. But at that point, it would be chaos. It would be chaos because there'd be a lot of gripping to hold on to Alabama, but a 2-loss team, I think they'd have a tough time doing that.
I'd hate to have to try to explain that to the press when they start asking those questions. All right. In Indianapolis, a neutral field, I believe Lucas Oil Stadium is the site of the Big Ten championship game, the Big Ten with 14 teams. But Ohio State and Wisconsin is a classic old school matchup. 2 grinded out butthead teams. At least that's what you expect out of them. But Ohio State's got a whole nother ball game to deal with and a brand new quarterback.
Well, that's the problem. They've got a third-string quarterback that they've got to work in, a 250-pound quarterback.
What a monster.
I don't think he looked that great, and who knows what a week will do for him. But there's a lot of pressure on Ohio State in this game. Wisconsin can control it on the ground, Poe.
Melvin Gordon, yeah.
I mean, they can just control the game up front. So really, to me, it's more about Ohio State's defense. Can they survive that pounding and give any field position? Because if it's 1st and 90 yards, 1st and 80 yards for that Ohio State offense
take a while.
with a third-string quarterback, this isn't Utah State you're talking about. This is Ohio State. So I think it could be hard.
Well, I'm really interested to watch this game, and I think it's going to be a very entertaining tilt. And Wisconsin, a team, rumored to possibly be an opponent for Boise State should they get through against Fresno State. All right, when we come back, it's time to get into the big game, the first Mountain West Championship game for Boise State against Fresno State. That and more right here on Inside the Broncos, Football in the West. Welcome back to Inside the Broncos, Football in the West, brought to you by Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley's solar authority. Jeff Caves, Larry Pulowski with you here. Time to talk Fresno State. All the marbles out there on the table for that potential Big Six bowl game appearance, and Fresno State is coming to town. But let's look at the standings first to see exactly how we got to this point. As we come into this game with Boise State and a 7-1 record in conference, you see what happened to Colorado State, tough day at Air Force. Fresno State sneaks in on the other side at 6-6. Your thoughts on the western side of this deal?
Well, Fresno really gets in because of their win over San Diego State, which carries the day. And Nevada had their chances this season. Unfortunately, they could not complete it down the stretch. They just may have not had the depth, experience. I don't think San Diego State had the depth this year to get it done. It was a pretty tough year for the West Division overall. Their record against the Mountain was pretty poor.
There's a lot of losses over there on that side of the table.
Yeah, pretty poor.
All right. Well, when you think about Fresno State, you think about offense. And offensively coming into this game, they average over 400 yards a game, but again, nowhere near the kind of production they put out last year. They came into Broncos Stadium and put up 27 points in the first game. It was a very close game until kind of the fourth quarter. It created some separation there, Jeff. But your thoughts on this offense and Brian Burrell, who's kind of this guy has been demoted, recreated, demoted, recreated. He's resilient.
Well, I think that's the key. Burrell's really been one of the stabilizing factors. And when I think it was Waller went down the game before this with a shoulder injury, he came right back and played. And he played very well. He's a very good back. He had a good day against Boise State as well. But really, it's about Burrell, and can he convert on 3rd and long? Because they will load up on the run. You're going to make quarterbacks beat you in these kinds of games, and Burrell has not had a steady season. But maybe that time away calmed him down and allowed him to see things clearer without as much pressure, and he's performing much better now because they're not going to yank him.
Well, we know Martez Waller is the key to the running game, and he's going to get plenty of carries, and he's going to get plenty of tests against this Boise State defense. But Burrell's main target is Josh Harper, and this kid does a nice job. He's picked up 76 catches, almost 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's the real deal, and he's a guy Boise State's got to be concerned about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think they can just exclusively worry about him, but they always will think about, hey, let's put Dante Dion in him. Let's make sure we have our best guy in him, specifically when he's to the field, because then he's got a lot of real estate to work with. So I'm sure they have their eye on him, and at the same time, I think this is a game where you can let the dogs out and let them get after Burrell in obvious pass situations, and there will be those kind of situations. Just ask Utah State.
Well, Boise State's only giving up 363 yards a game in total offense. They limited Utah State to 313 last week and a pittance in the second half. This is a defense that has 17 picks on the season. They've done a really nice job in the turnover game to, kind of fend off what Grant Hedrick let happen in the early part of the season on the other side of the football.
I think what's happened, Poe, is that they've put teams in holes and put quarterbacks in a position where the quarterback sometimes is flushed out of the pocket or flushed back in and feels they have to make a play, and they're throwing up a lot of balls in the middle of the field. Darian Thompson's got a lot of interception. He's got a lot of traction. Some linebackers have made some big plays between the hashes. I think quarterbacks have gotten desperate to make plays against Boise State because they've gotten down in the games as this offense is cranked up. That's one way Boise State's offense impacts their defense.
Well, Boise State's offense averaging over 500 yards a game, just cracked the 40-point a game mark. This is a team that is rolling, and if you look at stats over the last 5 to 6 games, it is an impressive machine to watch. And it's not just Jay Ajayi. It's Hedrick. It's the receiving core. It's the tight ends. It's the presence of McNichols as an alternative running back in that backfield. I don't know how Fresno State's going to stop these guys.
Well, the coordination now is what's impressive to me, Poe. They all know what they're doing. It's kind of like this show. We sit back, Wide does all the work, Big Joe's got the buttons. All we do is sit here, and these guys are operating around us. But everybody knows their place. Everybody knows when somebody's going to move, somebody else has to react, and that's where that Boise State's offense is at now. They just use so many people in it. They have to coordinate a lot of different people to know where to go every play, the triple tight end sets. There's a lot of sophistication with it, and I think they're just really laser focused right now, and they're executing.
Well, as Jay Ajayi said, I believe that decision to not give him the Mountain West Player of the Week didn't bother him that much. Mountain West Player of the Year, not a big deal. Adds fuel to the fire. I don't want to see the J train with any more fuel in the fire because that train's on fire right now, and he's a scary dude. So, Jeff, just a quick wrap up. Your thoughts on a 20-point spread for Boise State. Are they going to cover that?
Boy, that is a real good question, and I've lost a lot of respect for myself. But if I had to, I'd spot the points. I would. I'd spot them.
All right, very good. Well, how about 670 KBOI pregame show this weekend?
We're there at 3 o'clock. Of course, just tune in to 670 KBOI for Bronco Game Day.
All right, and Jeff Caves, you can see him at 93.1 The Ticket. Every day, you'll hear him from 3 to 6 o'clock on Idaho Sports Talk. For Jeff Caves, I'm Larry Pulowski. Thanks to our sponsors, Even Green Technology, Western Heating and Cooling, and obviously our friends at Leisure Time. We'll see you next year. Thanks for watching Inside the Broncos Football in the West.
Inside the Broncos, Football in the West is brought to you by Even Green Technology, the Treasure Valley Solar Authority, and Steve's Hometown Ford and Steve's Hometown Toyota, 100% committed to your satisfaction. Also by Western Heating and Cooling, turn to the experts, and Leisure Time Spas and Hearth Products. Come see us at Leisure Time. You'll be glad you did.